when it comes to eschatology, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of tradition, and a lot of ignorance. And I don't know what it is about that specific subject, but it sure does create a lot of heat without a whole lot of light, in my opinion. That's why it's sort of a mantra around here. We don't do eschatology. But the problem with that's twofold. First of all, eschatology is a wider term than just the theories regarding the timing and the relationship between the coming of Christ, resurrection, the concept of a millennium, what's the nature of the millennium, all the rest of that kind of stuff. Eschatology proper is last things, and hence is primarily focused upon such issues as final judgment, resurrection, the nature of the eternal state, heaven and hell, basically. That's eschatology proper. And then the rest of this stuff, I wish there was a different term to use for it, to be honest with you, then that would be a little bit more specific. But most of us are raised, if you're raised in the church, it's fairly natural to have a default eschatology. And if you're raised in a church where you didn't have almost any interaction outside of your particular group, which is common in many situations, then you can just sort of assume that everyone has the same eschatology. And once you run into somebody that doesn't, then you automatically think that they're weird, maybe not even a Christian, and you get ready to put up your dukes and have it out. And on the last program, I mentioned the King James only guys and how they said that I'm preparing the world for the mark of the beast. Well, there's a whole world of beliefs behind that. Specifically, when I mentioned the lawnmower just sitting there running in the front yard, unless you have been in the basement of an independent fundamentalist Baptist church at 11:45 p.m. on New Year's night watching Thief in the Night, then that doesn't make much sense to you. But if you have, it still gives you chills. It really does. And so I understand that if that's all you've ever experienced, that you haven't read anything else, or that you don't know other people that have different views, then someone going, yeah, I just don't buy that anymore. That can make. I had people writing to me, why don't you believe in the rapture and stuff like that? And I'm like, have you looked at this issue down through church history? You know, there have been different perspectives down through church history, and dispensationalism is a modern perspective, very modern, 1800s. And you had historic premillennialism, you've got amillennialism, you've got postmillennialism. Man, the early church is a mixture of everything. There was millennialism all the way back there, but what did that necessarily mean? And it can be uncomfortable to discover that there are other perspectives other than the one that you have held. For a long time after, and for me, and I've told this story before, what happened for me was I was raised with one particular view and went to Bible college and heard other views. And the thing that first impacted me was being challenged. It seems that the exegetical methodology you're using to substantiate your position is not the same exegetical methodology you use to substantiate other key issues, which I was already dealing with at that time, specifically dealing with Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, so defending the deity of Christ, resurrection. It seems like the method of interpretation you're using is different. And they were right. It was different because I had just sort of, accepted a particular set, had never seen it, I'd never seen a 5 Views book or whatever else it might be. And so for a long time, I jokingly said I'm a panmillennialist. It'll all pan out in the end. Part of that was just simply due to the fact that, I'll just be honest with you, when this issue comes up and when I look at the size of books, I just can't bring myself to invest the time and effort. I mean, I read a lot of books within one particular perspective many years ago when I still held that perspective, but I can't invest the time. It's not an area of my passion at all. That's why, we have people in our church that hold to all 3 of the major perspectives, and probably some people that would still have a lot of elements of dispensationalism in there, even though that would not really fit with a overall framework of the London Baptist Confession. And I don't care. There are certain things you need to affirm, eschatologically speaking. God's going to wrap it all up the way he wants to wrap it all up. Christ is going to return. He's king. There's going to be a day of judgment. All those things are absolutely necessary, but especially when it comes to eschatology, there are things that are assumed and often very rarely proven when it comes to these things. And so I have post-millennial friends, and I have historic premillennial friends, and we do not sit around and argue the issues. Am I saying it's not important? No. It does impact things. There's no question about the fact that it impacts things, that there is a relationship. It's not just some area that's off there and you can just ignore it and not worry about it. And no, it is relevant. There's no two ways about it. Well, people ask, well, and how'd you adopt? Well, what position do you hold then? I am an amillennialist. And people say, well, are you an optimistic amillennialist or a pessimistic amillennialist? So it depends what I have for breakfast, I guess. But if I had to choose between those two, I'd say I'm a pessimistic amillennialist. And that generally is in regards to the idea of the growth of the kingdom. Well, I think God's kingdom has grown worldwide, but I think it will always be persecuted, and I believe it will always, men will always be deceiving and being deceived, and that if you want to live godly in Christ Jesus, you will always experience persecution. I don't see the evidence that it's God's intention during the existence of the church on earth for the church to become the majority voice in culture. Certainly historically, any time that anyone thought that was happening, it was actually the opposite of what was happening, to be honest with you. But anyway, well, how'd you get there? You were raised dispensational premillennial. Yep. Pretribulation rapture too, in case you're wondering, because there's if you want to see people fight, if you want to see a knockdown drag out, it's not about post pre. It's between the pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-tribbers. They'll go at each other like I don't know what. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, people will say, well, what moved you from being panmillennial to being onmillennial? Because panmillennial isn't really a position. I mean, some of you really like it, but it's not really it's an agnostic thing. I don't know, so it'll all pan out in the end, so I won't, I'm still hoping these lectures will someday appear in where they somehow will appear in print or what, because I don't have them anywhere. But what I would like to see is the set of lectures that I heard from on the subject of this age and the age to come. They were from Trinity Ministerial Academy. Dr. Nichols was the one that delivered them. And it was listening to him work through Jesus' own eschatology. Jesus taught a lot about this subject. And in Jesus' teaching, you have this age and the age to come. That's all you've got. You don't have any transitionary periods. You don't have any periods in between. You don't have any evolution. This age, here's what happens in this age. The age to come, here's what's there. So if you start with that as your framework, there's not a whole lot of room for all the speculative stuff that has been crammed into various eschatological theories. Amillennialism is the simplest. It's the cleanest. I don't think any system has answers for everything. But of the three, I believe that it has the least. It has the most consistent exegesis and the least unanswered questions, or at least the least forced answered questions. And given that some of Dr. Nichols' stuff is appearing in print right now, I'm still hopeful that might take place. It might happen. Very similar. I actually grabbed some. I had to. The funny thing is, I had to go looking. And I didn't even find all of them, but they were all in, at least the ones I found were in one spot anyways. And I even forgotten where they were because, again, this is just not my area. But someone on Twitter asked yesterday, and so I looked up and I found The End Times Made Simple by Samuel Waldron. How could everyone be so wrong about biblical prophecy? And basically, and I guess I read on Amazon, basically what he's saying is what I just got done explaining in regards to those lectures. Jesus' eschatology was this age and the age to come. If anybody's teaching you something more than that, then they're missing the basic paradigm. And that's pretty much what Sam Waldron's saying. And most of my Reformed Baptist brethren are amillennialists. They're posties amongst us. There's a few odd historic premillers, but basically the Reformed Baptist default position is amillennial. And so there you've got Sam Waldron's book. Highly recommend it. Another recent book. Yeah, I know there's a sequel to it. They're both in the Alpha and Omega Amazon bookstore now. A Case for Amillennialism, Understanding the End Times, Kim Riddlebarger. This one, I remember this just recently. Ha! Okay. Well, you're getting older when just recently was 14 years ago. I thought this was fairly recent. Hey, it's more recent than most of my books. So, A Case for Millennialism, Kim Riddlebarger, 2003. That's an IVP imprint. Millennialism Today. I love Today, and Today was 1966. But you've got William E. Cox's. That has just got to be the most boring cover I think I've ever seen. Well, there are actually a lot of them. And then sort of a classic, Ray Summers, Worthy as the Lamb is another. So there are just a few books that they're all in the same spot in my library and hadn't been moved in a long time. But so we grabbed them, and there you go. If you want to take a look at them, look, there's all sorts of books presenting postmillennialism. Don't judge. The most important thing to do, is do not judge any eschatological system based upon your viewing of the modern world situation. When you've got people who are, for example, selling videos and books and stuff like that based on, the current headlines. Hal Lindsey, sorry, but hey, I remember, I don't know why this is so clear in my memory, but I remember exactly what the little inside auditorium looked like at my high school, Independence High School, 75th Avenue in Maryland here in Phoenix. I was in the first 4-year graduating class from Independence High School. And so it was real brand new and it was really neat. And that's the same room where we had the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. I was the lead prosecuting attorney. I've still got some pictures of that. Man, I really wish we had kept it. It disappeared somehow, but we had the videotape of the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. And man, I wish I still had that. That was really, really, really cool. Someone just posted the cover of Dangerous Airwaves on Twitter and said, here's an example of a non-boring cover. Yes, and that artwork was done by Chris Arnzen, by the way. Just thought you all would want to know that. And he's the one that came up with the title, too. So he wanted me to write that book, and so I did. And Pulpit Crimes, for that matter, did that, too. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes. I remember that room, that, it had fold-down seats. It was really nice back then. They've probably had to have redone it 3 or 4 times since then because kids destroy things. But, well, we tried to burn the school down 13, 14 days after it opened. That was a bummer. No, seriously, we had a fire, and some sophomore started fire amongst desks, boxes of desks, and it was that was the first time I ever went running out of a burning building. So anyway, it was a beautiful school, and I remember sitting there as one of those tests your senior year, where California Standardized Achievement Test. I don't remember what it was, but I would always get done very early. I don't know. When I was a kid, I developed this bad habit of trying to get everything done fast rather than checking my work and stuff like that. But I was done long before everybody else was, and you were allowed to take out a book and start reading. I have the clearest image of me sitting in that room reading The Late Great Planet Earth. I get it. I get the attraction. You want the Bible to be something it really isn't. A lot of us forget that the Bible has been read by Christians in many different cultures at many different times. And, one of the things that really was important to me was coming to realize you need to interpret the book of Revelation as having meaning to the people to whom it was written. If its primary meaning is for people way down the road who would have no clue what this was all about, sort of missing something. And so just a few things to keep in mind. It's sad that this is such an area of unnecessary division. It is something we need to talk about. It does have meaning and impact, but we need to be able to have our discussions about it. And so eschatology just scares me. It really does. And because it gets people so angry with one another. And there's all sorts of things that divide us. That's not an area that we need to be really focused